Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, less than a week before the NFL draft, and we want to talk about another different scenario here, and I'm not entirely sure if this was created by Jake Arthur or not, but if it is, then you guys can definitely give him all the credit in the comments or go over to Locked On and tell him how much you love this idea or don't love this idea. Either way, I saw him bring it up, and it sparked a lot of debate on social media. And it's about the Colts quarterback situation, obviously, and talking about a specific quarterback in this draft, aka Shedeur Sanders. Now, Jake proposed the idea. If Shedeur Sanders somehow fell to 14, should the Indianapolis Colts make that pick and bring him into the fold? I think Cody and I have talked about this enough over here before the show started, saying I think you and I are both in agreement, Cody, that there's very likely not going to be a chance that Shedeur falls to 14.
Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So,
for a variety of reasons. Yeah.
For a variety of different reasons. So likely this isn't much of a scenario. But if it were a scenario, should the Colts pull the trigger and make Shedeur Sanders the potential quarterback of the future for the Indianapolis Colts? Cody, do you think that's a good idea or no?
I do not think that is a good idea, Derek, not because of what I think of Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, but because of where the state of this team is. Derek, we did a video a couple days ago talking about how the Indianapolis Colts should approach this draft and what the strategy should be in terms of building around the quarterbacks you already have, right? Because let's be honest, this is a very, very important season for a lot of people calling the shots right now. It's very important for Chris Ballard. This is probably his final leg. If the Colts don't make the playoffs, if they don't win the division, if they don't start doing some of the things they failed to do in his tenure, he's probably going to be done after this season. Same with Shane Steichen. 2 years. Last year was a disaster in a lot of ways from an offensive standpoint, just a team standpoint. You had so much going on. So it's a big year for him as well. You do think if Ballard's fired, Shane Steichen's probably going along with him with a lot of the coaching staff, if not all of the coaching staff. And obviously we know Anthony Richardson, a huge year for him going into year number 3 and has a lot more questions than answers right now, right? So I think when you're looking at it, going back to what I said about, what we talked about, the strategy needs to be building around the quarterbacks you already have on the roster as far as this organization goes where it is right now. Now, Derek, if this is a next offseason, if it's an offseason, where you really don't have anybody that you've invested in, like, say this is a completely new regime, new GM, new head coach, then yes, of course, I do think that would make some sense there. But I think with where Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, and Anthony Richardson are, I think they all have to depend on each other here in order to be here beyond 2025, frankly. And I don't think drafting Shedeur Sanders would do that. I think you need to find some way to support that quarterback, whether that's, a tight end, which we've talked about, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, if he falls all the way to 14, or even an offensive line pick, right? Like something there to support either quarterback that goes out there to give you the best chance to win, not maybe next year, the next couple of years, but this year. That's where you're at right now, right? And even on a defensive pick, like helping you do the things that you need to do to win now. And, if this is, like I said, a rookie GM or a first-year GM, he has the luxury of the next couple years, if not, the next 5 years, right? As opposed to Chris Ballard, he doesn't have that luxury. Shane Steichen, he doesn't have that luxury. Obviously, Anthony Richardson doesn't have that luxury either. Like nobody on this current regime, on this current team, that's of major importance that we're going to be watching has the luxury beyond this year.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points there. The timeline in which you have to be worried about that is a very big concern. With this offseason, we have heard Chris Ballard mention that it's going to be an open quarterback competition between Anthony Richardson and whatever other quarterback they might bring in, right? So this move would kind of contradict it in a few ways, but it would also benefit it in some ways. So obviously, what most people are thinking when they hear this decision, and those who agree that the Indianapolis Colts take Shedeur Sanders, if he were to somehow fall there, which again, I think there's a 99.5% chance that Shedeur does not fall that far, because for one, the Indianapolis Colts would have to trade up most likely to get Shedeur Sanders, because somebody, if they saw Shedeur Sanders falling past the Giants or past like the whatever other team there might potentially need a quarterback, like the Jets or some crap
Or the
like
Saints,
that, right?
even.
Like,
If the Saints don't take him.
yeah, if the
the open
Saints don't take him by 9, somebody would hop in to that top 15 before the Indianapolis Colts and would jump all over that. Somebody would.
Yeah,
It could be the Steelers that do it. I could keep going. But so to people's credit, because they're saying that the likelihood of it happening is so little that the Indianapolis Colts would potentially jump on it because of the fact that it was so unlikely that it happened and he just fell into their laps. You would take that opportunity because of the fact he would likely be better. He would likely be better than Anthony Richardson, you would think. And he would likely be better than what Daniel Jones has promoted. Very well could be the case. But I don't think this is worth it because, again, you brought in Daniel Jones for the exact purpose to challenge Anthony Richardson. You already know that there's going to be a quarterback competition between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. And now if you're going to bring in the idea that a third quarterback is going to compete, or you're just going to throw all that quarterback competition out the window and say, no, we drafted Shedeur because, we know he can be better than Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. But, like, you drafted Anthony Richardson higher in the 2023 draft class for that exact reason. Yes, Shedeur Sanders has more time in college. Shedeur might be a little more polished and all these other things. Cody, I have my own issues with Shedeur Sanders and like some of the Sanders family with how, they approach certain things. One of those being that Shedeur Sanders is very, very, very well known around media. And one thing that the Indianapolis Colts do not get a lot of is the media attention. Shedeur would bring his own media presence into there, which some people might say is a good thing. I think it's the exact opposite. But then again, I'm not talking about that in this regard. I just think the whole quarterback competition thing, it throws it all away. And then again, for Chris Ballard, who said that we're doing things a different way, and then all of a sudden now it's like, why are you seriously going to tell me that another first round draft pick that you chose now has to be in a competition again? And you're telling me that another first round draft pick, you may not have picked a player that may not play? Like, what are we doing here? Like, you are showing complete incompetence to get the quarterback of the future. Now, if you are saying, I will give people this, that if he drafts Shedeur Sanders, and Sanders, without a shadow of a doubt, is going to be the quarterback of the future for the Indianapolis Colts. Again, we don't know that for a fact. A lot of people seem to think Shedeur Sanders will have a long career in the NFL. I don't really believe so. But still, it reduces the fact that you brought in Daniel Jones for $14 million to do that. Like, if you wanted to get somebody in the first round at quarterback and you were that dead set on getting one in the draft, then you should have just not taken Daniel Jones. You could have gotten somebody like a Jackson Dart at 14, maybe. You could have taken somebody like a Will Howard in the second round if you felt confident that he was still going to be there. Like, there are other options. But the time for picking a quarterback early in the draft is gone. You've spent $14 million to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson. You've already got two guys that are competing at this spot. So why would you bring in a third? That just makes no sense to me. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's a great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
Like I said earlier, Derek, like the timelines, they just don't match up with where the Colts are and with what if they pick Shedeur Sanders, like what in the world are you communicating, right? It's like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me for the current timeline. Like if it's a year from now, okay, I would understand that a whole lot. I actually agree with that. But where you currently stand, like it or not, you are tied to the success or failure of these two quarterbacks you have, right? Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. Right, you obviously the hope is that Anthony Richardson beats out Daniel Jones as a QB1. But can you imagine what message that sends to the other quarterbacks? Like, we don't believe in either of you. Then what the heck's the point of bringing in this quarterback competition? It just seems like it would just almost be counterintuitive to what the Colts have been preaching this entire offseason.
It could very well be the case that they do that, Cody, but the ultimate like I want to tell people this that think that bringing Shedeur Sanders in is a good idea. First of all, it could work out. It could work out. And the Colts end up, winning, 10 games with Shedeur Sanders, 11 games with Shedeur Sanders. It doesn't matter because you have pissed off the remainder of your quarterbacks that are on the roster. So they're both going to leave. And you have ruined the culture in the locker room again by going on the opposite end of that again, because everyone's talking about Anthony Richardson versus Daniel Jones, not Shedeur Sanders, Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones. And so you ruin that, and you 100% should still get fired because, again, you have spent valuable resources to bring in Daniel Jones for absolutely no reason at all. So if Daniel Jones is your QB 2 or 3 and he's sitting on a bench worth almost $15 million, that's stupid. It again shows that Ballard is making dumb financial decisions, and it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't.
No, I mean, you know the old saying, like, if you have 2 QBs, you have none. Can you imagine what they mean about if you have 3 QBs then? What does that say about you, right?
Yeah.
It'd just be a disaster. I just feel like it would be a disaster. It would bring forth – you already have drama at the quarterback position. It would just be even, I think, amplified even more, especially, like you said, with all the media stuff around Shedeur Sanders. Like, he's such a polarizing prospect already. Like, bringing him in, I think, would just shed even more light. Probably not positive light on your organization as a whole. So, yeah, like I said earlier, I think the goal has to be to kind of ride or die with these 2 quarterbacks. And that's kind of, unfortunately, like it or not, that's the bed that you've made for yourself. And you kind of have to lie in it, right, at this point. So unless you just have utmost supreme confidence that Shedeur Sanders can come in this year, beat out both quarterbacks, and can lead you to the playoffs. I mean, that's the only way I could say, all right, sure, do it. But even then, like, there's no guarantees that's going to happen. Right.
And here's my other counterback to that. If there are 2 or 3 quarterback hungry teams that are willing to pass on Shedeur Sanders and let him fall to 14, Cody, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
What does that tell you? Why in the world is somebody willing to accept a quarterback that 2 or 3 other teams that are desperate for quarterbacks passed on this guy? Why would you pick somebody like that?
Right. I mean, heck, we saw the Falcons last year go and draft Michael Penix super early, and nobody thought that was going to happen. So, yeah, you're right. If there's a team like the Saints that clearly need a quarterback, if there's some other teams like we've mentioned,
Giants.
like the Jets, the Giants, like teams that are just like, and I understand, like, there's some good players ahead of them. Like, I wouldn't fault them at all for taking Abdul Carter. But I agree with you, Derek, because if there's no teams, if those teams pass on him, okay, I understand because there's some fantastic prospects. But even some teams not willing to trade up ahead of you and go and get him, like, that is a concern for me. That is a big concern. You are absolutely right there because we see it all the time. Desperate teams will do whatever it takes to go get the quarterbacks if they believe
we saw 6 quarterbacks get taken in the draft last year, bro.
Exactly.
Even to some teams that didn't need quarterbacks, but they took them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, desperate teams will do desperate things to get the guy if they believe he can be the franchise guy for the next decade. And if nobody's willing to do that for Shedeur, that's a little bit concerning for me. And I'm not going to go stake my, reputation and stake any sort of valuable draft capital I have into a quarterback that may not even be the QB1 this year. Now, next year, if you're in a situation like this, okay, like, I get that a little bit, right? But you're not. That's just not where you're at right now. So I did think from the Colts standpoint, I understand, like, the question, but I just don't really see a viable scenario where this makes any sort of sense with the current state of this team.
Yeah, same here. All right, well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Let us know your thoughts. Do you think the Colts should take a shot at Shedeur Sanders if he falls on the draft boards? Or do you think that resources should be spent elsewhere? But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always,